What's poppin'? What's crackin'? Today I'm gonna be spilling the tea, if you will. I'm gonna be talking about some popular books that I didn't like. I have 5 books that I'm gonna talk about today, so let's get into it. So we're gonna start it off simple. We're gonna start off easy. First book that I'm talking about today is Looking for Alaska by John Green. I gave this book 2 stars, I think, and I would have given it 1, but it had something. Just like most John Green books, we have a boring-ass white dude who meets a fun, sexy, quirky, manic pixie dream girl. This manic pixie dream girl has some kind of sob story that we find out later on as the story develops to kind of add depth to her character or something. Even though her character is even in the book in the first place, is to emphasize how boring the white dude is and to create some kind of weird fantasy for like boring white dudes everywhere. Because in real life, the fun, quirky, sexy, adventurous, spontaneous, manic pixie dream girl would never be interested in the boring, unseasoned white dude. Also, why the fuck did she pick her own name? That's fucking weird and dumb, but like, whatever. Didn't care about it, didn't like it, just, it didn't happen for me. The second book that I'm going to talk about is Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. I thought this book was so overrated and not anywhere near as good as Fangirl, but you know. Eleanor, to me, just seemed like such an ingenuine character and so extra on purpose, just so there could be a quirky girl in the book. Like, yes, we're tired of the same fucking white girl who's so beautiful but doesn't recognize her own beauty in like every YA romance, but Eleanor was just unrealistic. And Park was just boring, so like he wasn't interesting enough either to make me care about their relationship even a little bit. Their relationship was just unseasoned, boring, and really lame, to say the least. I almost DNF'd it halfway through and didn't because everybody was in love with this book, and I was like, well, it has to get better. It didn't. Spoiler! The third book is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, whatever. I feel like there's a lot more people coming out saying that they're not a fan of this series or Sarah J. Maas's books in general after several books in the series that they've read, and they're coming out and saying that. But because I'm not like other girls, I hated this book from the first one. The main reason that I didn't like this story or like this series from the very first book is that I felt like it was trying to push and emphasize the whole badass independent girl like trope, I guess, way too hard. It pushed it and emphasized it so much more than I think needed to have been, whatever. That it just felt not genuine at all to me. It felt really cheesy. It wasn't what I had wanted. I was actually pretty interested in the storyline and like the plot and everything and the world building, I guess. You know, it's a little controversial, but the main character in general, I just wasn't a fan of. I wasn't a fan of the character development on her or the writing of her character. It just was really cheesy. The next book that I'm talking about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. She was promising. I was hopeful. I had seen just glowing reviews about this book. I've seen videos, people praising this book. I don't know if I want to say I hated this book because hate is a strong word, but I really didn't like this book. This book to me felt extremely chaotic, very all over the place. It felt like there wasn't exactly one specific plot or storyline that, you know, you would follow as the reader. To me, this book felt like a clusterfuck of just several different subplots. I also didn't like any of the characters. All of the characters were very, very unlikable. The one character that I was fine with and didn't have any qualms with was the dad, Mr. Richardson, and he had like little to no page time. He was in this book for like 3 pages, so I mean he barely counts as a character honestly at that point. There was one other character that was like pretty okay throughout the book, and then he just like was awful at the end. So no one in this book had redeeming qualities. They all sucked. They were annoying. I also felt that as the reader, you're kind of forced to root for the mother, Mia, and I hated her character. I didn't hate her character, but I strongly disliked her character. And then you learn different things about her character throughout the story that made me dislike her even stronger. I was not rooting for her character at all in the entire book, and I didn't like how I was kind of being forced to when she wasn't a good character. I didn't like her character. I thought she was incredibly irresponsible as a mother, and it was just no good. It was not good. I was not a fan. This book was incredibly disappointing. That's it. The fifth and final book that I have to talk about today is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't even know where to begin. I know that everyone and their moms likes this book, or loves this book, excuse me, but I just didn't get it. I don't know if there was some big underlying kind of message that I really missed when reading this book, but I just don't get it. I personally thought this book was pretty boring. I thought it was kind of a stereotypical perspective on the time period. I feel like this book could have been so much more than sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that's literally all this book was. I know that a big aspect of like the 70s, and especially rock and roll bands in the 70s, is like that whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of idea. But there's so much more going on in people's lives than sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and this book could have been so much more, and it could have been so much better in my opinion. A lot of people say the way to read this book is through the audiobook because it is written in like an interview format. There's no like narrative or description, but to me, I felt like, I mean, I can hear their voices in my head, so why do I need the audiobook? And because it is written like that, I felt like if I was listening to the audiobook, it would just feel like I was kind of listening to a podcast, and I wasn't too into that idea, so I just read the physical book. And personally, I don't think my opinion would change if I were to listen to the audiobook. I think my opinion would be exactly the same. I didn't like any of the characters really. The only characters that you really get to know, I guess, are Daisy, Billy, and like his wife, but I didn't like any of them, so I really just don't get why this was so hyped up. I have read review after review and watched video after video of people saying how much they love this book and how they cried and all this, and I'm like, where? You know, love what you love, but this book just didn't do it for me. I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will. And you know what? That's really fine. Like, this was probably the most disappointing book of this year. I was so excited to read this book. I was so let down. I tend to be more critical about books. It's really hard for me to just give a book 5 stars or truly say, oh, I really enjoyed this book. But it's a lot easier for me to say I didn't like this book or I have a lot of problems with it. I'm pretty picky about everything ever, especially books. That completes the 5 popular books that I did not like. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time.